Leviticus chapter 15 Sexual Impurities. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron. He said, "Speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, when a man has a discharge from his body, that discharge makes him unclean. The rules about his uncleanness are, whether his body allows the discharge to flow or retains it, he is unclean. Any bed the man lies on and any seat he sits on shall be unclean. Anyone who touches his bed must wash his clothing and take a bath and will be unclean until evening. Anyone who sits on a seat where the man has sat must wash his clothing and take a bath and will be unclean until evening. Anyone who touches the body of a man so affected must wash his clothing and take a bath and will be unclean until evening. If the sick man spits on someone who is clean, that person must wash his clothing and take a bath and will be unclean until evening. Any saddle the sick man travels on will be unclean. All those who touch any object that may be under him will be unclean until evening. Anyone who picks up such an object must wash his clothing and take a bath and will be unclean until evening. All those whom the sick man touches without washing his hands must wash their clothing and take a bath and will be unclean until evening. Any clay pot the sick man touches must be broken, and any wooden utensil must be rinsed. When the man suffering from a discharge is cured, he must allow 7 days for his purification. He must wash his clothing and take a bath in running water, and he will be clean. On the 8th day he must take 2 turtle doves and 2 young pigeons and come before the Lord at the entrance to the tent of meeting and give them to the priest. The priest is to offer a sacrifice for sin with one of them and with the other a burnt offering. So the priest will perform the rite of atonement before the Lord for the man's discharge. When a man has a seminal discharge, he must bathe his whole body with water, and he shall be unclean until evening. Any clothing or leather touched by a seminal discharge must be washed, and it will be unclean until evening. When a man has had intercourse with a woman, both of them must take a bath, and they will be unclean until evening. When a woman has a discharge of blood and blood flows from her genitals, this uncleanness of her monthly periods shall last for 7 days. Anyone who touches her will be unclean until evening. Any bed she lies on during her impurity will be unclean. Any seat she sits on will be unclean. Anyone who touches her bed must wash his clothing and take a bath and will be clean until evening. Anyone who touches any seat she has sat on must wash his clothing and take a bath and will be unclean until evening. If there is anything on the bed or the chair on which she sat, anyone who touches it will be unclean until evening. If a man indeed sleeps with a woman who is unclean because of her monthly periods, he shall be unclean for 7 days. Any bed it lies on will be unclean. If a woman has a flow of blood for several days outside her period, or if her period is prolonged during the time this flow lasts, she shall be unclean as during her monthly periods. Any bed she lies on during the time this flow lasts will be unclean as during her monthly period. Any seat she sits on will be unclean as it would be during her monthly periods. Anyone who touches them will be unclean. He must wash his clothing and take a bath and will be unclean until evening. When she is cured of her flow, she will let 7 days pass, then she will be clean. On the 8th day she is to take 2 turtle doves and 2 young pigeons and bring them to the priest at the entrance to the tent of meeting. With one of them the priest is to offer a sacrifice for sin, and with the other a burnt offering. This is the way in which the priest will perform the rite of atonement over her before the Lord for the flow that made her unclean. Make the people of Israel aware of every uncleanness lest they die of their uncleanness by defiling my tabernacle which is among them. Such is the regulation concerning a man with a discharge. Anyone made unclean by a seminal discharge, a woman unclean because of her monthly periods, a man and a woman with a discharge, a man who sleeps with an unclean woman. Leviticus chapter 16, the Day of Atonement. The Lord spoke to Moses after the death of the two sons of Aaron, who died when they approached the presence of the Lord with profane fire. The Lord said to Moses, "Command your brother Aaron not to enter at any time he places the holy place beyond the veil, before the mercy seat which is on the ark, lest he die. For I appear in the cloud over the mercy seat. This is how Aaron will enter the holy place, with a bull for a sacrifice for sin and a ram for a burnt offering. He is to put on the sacred linen tunic and linen breeches next to his body. He is to have the linen girdle around him and wear the linen turban. These are sacred garments, so he must bathe in water before he puts them on. The community of the people of Israel has to give him 2 male goats for a sacrifice for sin and 1 ram for a burnt offering. Then Aaron shall offer the bull for a sacrifice for sin to make atonement for himself and for his household. He shall take the 2 male goats and present them to the Lord at the entrance to the tent of meeting. He is to cast lots for the 2 goats, 1 lot for the Lord and 1 lot for Azazel. Aaron shall offer the goat on which the lot fell to the Lord as a sacrifice for sin. But the goat on which the lot fell for Azazel will be placed alive before the Lord to make atonement by being sent into the wilderness for Azazel. Aaron will offer the bull as a sacrifice for sin to make atonement for himself and his household, and he shall slaughter the bull as a sacrifice for sin for himself. Then he shall take a censer full of coals from the fire above the altar before the Lord, and 2 handfuls of powdered fragrant incense, and take them inside the veil. He shall put the incense on the fire before the Lord, and the cloud of incense will envelope the mercy seat that is on the testimony, so that he may not die. He will take some of the blood of the bull and sprinkle it with his finger on the eastern part of the mercy seat. Then he will sprinkle some of the blood with his finger 7 times in front of the mercy seat. Then he shall slay the goat as a sacrifice for the sin of the people, and take its blood inside the veil, and do with its blood what he did with the blood of the bull. He shall sprinkle it on the mercy seat and in front of it. In this way he shall make atonement for the holy place because of the uncleanness of the people of Israel, and because of all their acts of rebellion and sin. And he shall do the same for the tent of meeting which stands among them in the midst of all their uncleanness. No one shall remain in the tent of meeting from the time Aaron goes to make atonement in the holy place until he comes out. After he has made atonement for himself, for his household, and for the whole congregation of Israel, he shall go out to the altar which is before the Lord and make atonement for it. Then he shall take some of the bull's blood and some of the goat's blood, and apply it on the horns of the altar on all sides. He shall sprinkle the blood on it and with his finger 7 times, and cleanse it and consecrate it from the uncleanness of the people of Israel. The scapegoat. When he has finished making atonement for the holy place, for the tent of meeting, and for the altar, he shall bring forward the live goat. He shall lay his hand on the head of the goat and confess over it all the guilt of the people of Israel, all their acts of rebellion and sins against me. So he will put them on the head of the goat and send it away to the wilderness by the hand of a man who is waiting ready. So the goat will carry away all their guilt to a remote area when the man releases it in the desert. Then Aaron is to go into the tent of meeting and take off the linen garments he had put on before he entered the sacred place and leave them there. He must bathe himself with water in a holy place and put on his clothes. After that he will come out and offer the burnt offering for himself and the burnt offering for the people, to make atonement for himself and the people. The fat of the sacrifice for sin he shall burn on the altar. The man who releases the goat for Azazel shall wash his clothes and bathe himself with water, after which he may re-enter the camp. The bull and the goat offered as sacrifice for sin, whose blood was brought in to make atonement in the holy place, shall be brought outside the camp, and their hides, their flesh, and their intestines shall be burned in the fire. The one who burns them shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water, after which he may re-enter the camp. The fast. This shall be an irrevocable statute for you. On the 10th day of the 7th month you must humble yourselves by fasting and do no work, neither the native nor the alien living among you. For on this day atonement will be made for you to cleanse you. You shall be cleansed of your sins before the Lord. It is a Sabbath of solemn rest, when you will humble yourself. By fasting, it is an irrevocable statute. The priest who is anointed and ordained to succeed his father will make atonement. He shall put on the linen garments, the sacred garments, and will make atonement for the holy place, for the tent of meeting, and for the altar. He shall also make atonement for the priest and all the people of the congregation. This shall be for you an irrevocable statute, to make atonement for the people of Israel once a year, because of all their sins. And Moses did as the Lord had commanded him. Psalm chapter 47. God is King of all nations. Clap your hands, all you peoples, acclaim God with shouts of joy. For the Lord the Most High is to be feared. He is a great King over all the earth. He brought peoples under our dominion and gave us authority over the nations. He chose our inheritance for us, the pride of Jacob whom he loves. God has ascended amid joyful shouts, the Lord amid trumpet blasts. Sing praises to God, sing praises. Sing praises to our King, sing praises. God is King of all the earth. Sing to him a hymn of praise. God rules over the nations. God reigns on his holy throne. The leaders of the nations have rallied together with the people of the God of Abraham. For the shields of the earth belong to God. He reigns over all. Matthew chapter 27, chapter 5, verse 1. Matthew chapter 27, verse 51 to 66. Suddenly the curtain of the temple sanctuary was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth quaked, rocks were split, tombs were opened, and several holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs, and after the resurrection of Jesus, they entered the holy city and appeared to many. The captain and the soldiers who guarded Jesus were greatly terrified when they saw the earthquake and all that had happened, and said, "Truly this man was the Son of God." There were also some women who watched from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee and saw to his needs. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons. The burial. It was now evening, and there arrived a wealthy man from Arimathea, named Joseph, who was also a disciple of Jesus. He went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus, and the governor ordered that the body be given to him. So Joseph took the body of Jesus, wrapped it in a clean linen sheet, and laid it in his own new tomb, which had been cut out of the rock. Then he rolled a huge stone across the entrance of the tomb and left. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary remained sitting there in front of the tomb. The guards at the tomb. On the following day, the day after the preparation for the Passover, the chief priests and the Pharisees went to Pilate and said to him, "Sir, we remember that when that impostor was still alive, he said, 'I will rise after 3 days. I will rise after 3 days.' Therefore have his tomb secured until the 3rd day, lest his disciple come and steal the body and say to the people, 'He was raised from the dead.' This would be a worse lie than the first." Pilate answered them, "You have a guard. Go and take all the necessary precautions." So they went to the tomb and secured it, sealing the stone and placing it under guard.